You know, the quiet out here is terrifying. It's the kind of quiet that presses in on you, makes you aware of the blood pumping in your own ears, like holding your breath for too long. But I need it. Ethan needs it. The sun bleeds over the hills around 5:30 every morning, and I'm always awake to see it. First thing is the garden. My hands, which used to navigate spreadsheets and city maps, now know the feel of soil, the texture of tomato leaves, the sharp scent of mint. It's methodical. Weed, water, prune. It keeps my head from getting too loud. By 7, I'm in the kitchen. Ethan's meals have to be soft, easy to swallow. Today, it's a pureed squash soup, creamy and golden. I blend it until it's perfectly smooth, pour it into his favorite bowl, the heavy ceramic one, and place it on a tray with a glass of water and a folded napkin. Everything has to be just so, a ritual, my daily act of repentance. Sometimes, while the blender whirs, my brain glitches, just for a second. I'm back in the car, the smell of wet asphalt, the wipers smearing the rain across the glass, the sudden, impossible shape of the deer frozen in the high beams. Then the sound, a sick crunch of metal and bone. I always shake my head, hard, forcing the image out. Focus on the soup, Amy. Focus on the now. This is how I make amends. This whole farm, this quiet life, it's my fortress, built to keep him safe, to help him heal from what I did. My sacrifice for his recovery. That's the deal I made with whatever is listening. I carry the tray down the dark hallway. His door, like always, is closed. I knock softly, 3 little taps. "I'm leaving breakfast here, Ethan," I say, my voice steady. "It's the squash soup you like." My ear is close to the wood. I never go in when the sun is up. The light, it hurts his eyes. A side effect of the head trauma, the doctor said. So many side effects. That's our rule. I wait. A few seconds pass, then I hear it. A faint, dry rustling from the other side. A scrape, like fabric on a wooden floor. That's his signal, his thank you. It's enough. The days have a rhythm. Clean the house, mend the fence, read. I read to him every afternoon, sitting on a stool outside his closed door. I just finished a history of the Appalachian Trail. Now I'm starting on an old book of naval battles, his old passions. I've gone through dozens of books this past year, my voice a low murmur against the oak of his door. He never requests a specific title. He never asks me to stop or continue. There's just the silence on the other side, a silent, listening void. But things have started to feel off. Little things you could easily explain away. And God, I'm an expert at explaining things away. At night, when the old house settles and groans, I sometimes hear another sound, a soft, rhythmic scratching from his room. Scrape, 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 like a fingernail being dragged lightly across the floorboards, over and over. The first time I heard it, my heart jumped into my throat. But then I smiled. Of course, he's trying to do his physical therapy. Moving his fingers, building back the strength. That's what it is. It has to be. It's a good sign. Then there's the smell. His room, even with the window cracked open to the night air, sometimes carries this odor. It's not a bad smell, not really. It's the smell of damp earth after a hard rain, the smell of a cellar. I'll be walking past his door on a dry, sunny afternoon and get a whiff of it. This old farmhouse, I tell myself, grabbing the air freshener. The plumbing is probably a mess. Gotta get that checked. The storm hit last night without any warning. One minute the sky was bruised purple. The next, the wind was screaming and trying to peel the shingles off the roof. The lights flickered twice, then died. Total darkness. My breath hitched. I fumbled in the kitchen drawer for the candles and matches, my fingers clumsy and slick with sweat. Shit, the generator must have failed. With a single candle casting huge, dancing shadows on the walls, I made my way through the house, checking the windows. The rain was coming down in sheets, hammering against the glass. The whole world was a symphony of chaos, and in the middle of it, our house was a tiny, fragile bubble of flickering light. I had to check on Ethan. My heart pounded against my ribs as I crept down the hallway, the candle flame trembling in my hand, threatening to go out. The shadows twisted into monstrous shapes. The floorboards creaked under my feet. I stopped in front of his door. The usual sounds of the storm were muffled here. It was just quiet. Too quiet. "Ethan," I whispered, my voice thin. "The power's out. It's just a storm. Are you okay?" Silence. I leaned closer, holding the candle up. Maybe he was asleep. Maybe he couldn't hear me over the wind. I brought the small flame nearer to the keyhole, just to see if I could see any movement. From inside the room, a sound erupted. It wasn't a word. It wasn't a groan of pain. It was a low, wet hiss. A sound that crawled up my spine and made the hair on my arms stand straight up. It was full of a hatred so deep, so ancient, it felt like it was clawing at the air. Before I could even process it, something slammed into the door from the other side. Thump! It wasn't a fist. It wasn't a kick. It was a heavy, dead-weight impact that shuddered through the wood and into my bones. The whole door rattled in its frame. I screamed, a short, choked-off yelp. The candle flew from my hand, hit the floor, and extinguished itself. I was plunged into absolute blackness. The sound of my own ragged breathing filled the hallway. "Ethan?" I stammered, scrambling backwards on my hands and knees. "Ethan, what was that? Are you hurt? It's me. It's Amy." Nothing. The only answer was the howling of the wind outside. My back hit the opposite wall, and I slid down to the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. My mind raced, desperately trying to build a wall, to find an explanation. The sudden darkness, the shadow of the candle flame under the door, it must have startled him. A seizure, maybe. A panic attack. He was scared. That's all it was. He was just scared. I sat there in the dark for a long time, repeating it to myself like a prayer. But for the first time in a year, the walls of my fortress felt thin, and I could feel a cold, terrifying draft blowing right through them. Sleep didn't happen after the storm. How could it? I spent the rest of the night on the floor in the hallway, my back pressed against the wall, listening. Just listening. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind rattling the window panes was him. It was the thing in that room about to break down the door. But nothing came. The sun rose, painting the dusty hallway in pale, forgiving stripes of light, and the world outside pretended to be normal. My logic, my beautiful, carefully constructed fortress, was crumbling. The explanation I'd clung to in the dark, he was just scared, it was a panic attack, felt thin and stupid in the daylight. That sound, that hiss, it wasn't fear, it was something else, something ancient and full of teeth. But I had to keep going. The routine was the only thing holding me together. Doubting is a betrayal, I told myself as I measured out the oatmeal. Questioning is giving up on him. Brain injuries are complex. They change people. This is just a new, terrifying symptom. That's all. It has to be. He was just scared. I sat there in the dark for a long time, repeating it to myself like a prayer. But for the first time in a year, the walls of my fortress felt thin, and I could feel a cold, terrifying draft blowing right through them. Sleep didn't happen after the storm. How could it? I spent the rest of the night on the floor in the hallway, my back pressed against the wall, listening. Just listening. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind rattling the window panes was him. It was the thing in that room about to break down the door. But nothing came. The sun rose, painting the dusty hallway in pale, forgiving stripes of light, and the world outside pretended to be normal. My logic, my beautiful, carefully constructed fortress, was crumbling. The explanation I'd clung to in the dark, he was just scared, it was a panic attack, felt thin and stupid in the daylight. That sound, that hiss, it wasn't fear, it was something else, something ancient and full of teeth. But I had to keep going. The routine was the only thing holding me together. Doubting is a betrayal, I told myself as I measured out the oatmeal. Questioning is giving up on him. Brain injuries are complex. They change people. This is just a new, terrifying symptom. That's all. It has to be. I sat there in the dark for a long time, repeating it to myself like a prayer. But for the first time in a year, the walls of my fortress felt thin, and I could feel a cold, terrifying draft blowing right through them. Sleep didn't happen after the storm. How could it? I spent the rest of the night on the floor in the hallway, my back pressed against the wall, listening. Just listening. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind rattling the window panes was him. It was the thing in that room about to break down the door. But nothing came. The sun rose, painting the dusty hallway in pale, forgiving stripes of light, and the world outside pretended to be normal. My logic, my beautiful, carefully constructed fortress, was crumbling. The explanation I'd clung to in the dark, he was just scared, he was just scared. It wasn't fear, it was something else, something ancient and full of teeth. But I had to keep going. The routine was the only thing holding me together. Doubting is a betrayal, I told myself as I measured out the oatmeal. Questioning is giving up on him. Brain injuries are complex. They change people. This is just a new, terrifying symptom. That's all. It has to be. I sat there in the dark for a long time, repeating it to myself like a prayer. But for the first time in a year, the walls of my fortress felt thin, and I could feel a cold, terrifying draft blowing right through them. I stood up, wiping my bloody finger on my jeans. The explanation was there. It was plausible, but it didn't feel right. It felt like a lie I was telling a child. The scratches didn't look like chair legs. They looked like talons. A few days passed. The house settled back into its quiet rhythm, but it was a different kind of quiet now. It was heavy, watchful. I found myself listening all the time, my head cocked at every noise. I stopped sleeping in my bed, choosing the lumpy sofa in the living room instead, closer to the front door, just in case. I was out back, checking on the vegetable garden after a spell of dry weather when I saw it. A little splash of red against the green of the lawn, right beneath Ethan's window. It was a robin, or what was left of one. Its chest cavity was ripped open, its wings bent at impossible angles. It looked less like it had been killed by a predator, and more like it had been torn apart by pure rage. My stomach turned. A fox, I thought immediately. Or a hawk. We're in the country. This stuff happens. I grabbed a shovel to bury it, trying not to look too closely. As I scooped up the mangled bird, my eyes caught on something else under the shade of the windowsill. The tiny gray body of a field mouse. Its head was gone. Just gone. I stood there, shovel in hand, a cold sweat breaking out on my neck. Foxes don't hunt this close to the house, not in broad daylight, and they don't leave their kills behind like discarded toys. My gaze drifted up to the window of Ethan's room. It was cracked open, just a few inches, like always, to let in the night air. The air freshener, the smell of damp earth, the scratching. Stop it, Amy. I squeezed my eyes shut.
You're exhausted. You're not sleeping. Your mind is playing tricks on you. I buried the animals quickly and went back inside, locking the door behind me. The house no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a cage, and I wasn't sure if I was the keeper or just another prisoner. That night was the worst. I couldn't settle. I paced the downstairs rooms, drank 2 glasses of wine that did nothing to calm my nerves, and ended up just standing in the dark hallway, staring at his door. I don't know what I was waiting for. Another hiss? The sound of scratching? There was an old ornate mirror hanging on the wall opposite his room. It came with the house, its silvering faded and spotted with age. I avoided looking at it. It always distorted things, made the hallway seem longer and darker than it was. But as I stood there, my eyes drifted to its surface. I saw my own reflection, a pale, haunted-looking woman in a dark corridor, and behind me, the reflection of Ethan's door. For a split second, a single, impossible heartbeat. The door in the mirror was open, just a crack, and in that crack stood a figure. It wasn't Ethan. It was tall, so tall its head nearly touched the top of the doorframe. And it was thin, impossibly thin, like a sketch made of charcoal and shadow. It had no face, no features, just a long black silhouette against the deeper black of the room. My heart didn't just pound, it stopped. Everything stopped. The air, my blood, time itself. I whipped around, a gasp tearing from my lungs. His door was closed, solid, locked, exactly as it had been a second ago. I stumbled back, my hand flying to my mouth to stifle a scream. My legs gave out, and I slid down the wall to the floor, the same spot I'd been in during the storm. I was shaking now, a deep, uncontrollable tremor that started in my bones. You didn't see that. You're overtired. It was a trick of the light, a smudge on the glass. You did not see that. The words repeated in my head, frantic and hollow. Who was I kidding? I saw it. I fucking saw it. The mail, of all things, was what finally broke me. The postman only comes out this far twice a week. I'd forgotten it was Tuesday. Tucked in with the bills and the junk mail was a letter with a familiar return address. The history department at the university where Ethan used to work. It had been forwarded from our old city apartment. My hands trembled as I tore it open. It was from a Dr. Albright, one of Ethan's older colleagues, a sweet, bumbling man who always smelled of pipe tobacco and old paper. I unfolded the letter. My eyes scanned the typed words. My dear Amelia, I am writing to once again express my deepest, most heartfelt condolences for Ethan's tragic passing last year.
He was a brilliant mind, and his absence is still keenly felt among us all. The letter slipped from my fingers. It fluttered to the floor. Passing? No, that's not right. The old man's confused. He must have misheard. Ethan was injured, badly injured. He didn't. I snatched the letter back up, my heart hammering against my ribs. I forced myself to keep reading. I was clearing out some old files and came across his preliminary research for that last project he was so passionate about, his work on the indigenous folklore of this very region of Pennsylvania. He was fascinated by the darker legends, particularly the ones whispered by the old Lenape storytellers, something about a creature they called the Wendigo, or, in some dialects, a soul-eater, a spirit born of tragedy and hunger that could take root in a place of great sorrow. He thought it was all just fascinating metaphor, of course, a way for ancient people to explain the unexplainable. The words blurred. Wendigo, soul-eater, a spirit born of tragedy. The hissing sound, the scratches on the floor, the torn-apart animals, the tall, thin shadow in the mirror. It all crashed down on me at once, a tidal wave of ice and horror. This wasn't a complex medical case. This wasn't post-traumatic stress. I ran to the fireplace, my breath coming in ragged sobs.
I crumpled the letter into a ball, my knuckles white. Dr. Albright was wrong. He had to be wrong. He was an old man. He made a mistake, a horrible, cruel mistake. With a shaking hand, I struck a match and tossed it into the hearth. The letter caught, curling at the edges, the words turning black before vanishing into ash. I watched it burn, watched the evidence of a truth I couldn't accept disappear. But I couldn't burn the words out of my head. Tragic passing, a spirit born of tragedy, soul eater. I stood there, staring into the flames, the smell of smoke filling my lungs. The fortress was gone, its walls had been incinerated, and for the first time, I looked down the dark hallway toward that closed door, and I wasn't filled with guilt or love or pity. I was filled with a cold, bottomless terror. If the man I married died in that crash a year ago, what have I been feeding? I didn't sleep. You don't sleep after something like that. I just sat on the cold floor of the living room, watching the last of the embers from the letter die in the fireplace, leaving behind a gray, meaningless smudge. The smell of burnt paper hung in the air. The house was quiet, too quiet. Every shadow seemed to stretch, to breathe. Every time the floorboards creaked upstairs, I imagined long, thin fingers testing the wood. My brain kept trying to fix it, to build the walls back up. Dr. Albright is old. He's confused. People get things wrong all the time. He must have misunderstood the report. Ethan was injured, not that. The words felt like sand in my mouth. I kept repeating them, but they had no weight. They couldn't hold back the memory of the letter's crisp, official typeface. Tragic passing. The sun came up. I watched the light crawl across the floor, and for the first time in a year, I was terrified of it, because with the light came the routine, the oatmeal, the tray, the 3 soft taps on his door. What have I been feeding? The question was a physical thing. It sat in my stomach like a stone. I couldn't do it. I couldn't walk down that hallway. I couldn't stand in front of that door and pretend that the weak shuffling inside was my husband. I needed to get out. Not just out of the house. I needed to get out of my own head. I needed to see other people. I needed to hear a normal sound, like a cash register opening or a car horn. Something to prove the world was still real, and I was just having a breakdown. Exhaustion, grief. Yeah, that was it. A delayed psychotic break brought on by stress. It made more sense than a soul eater. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the key in the ignition. The truck roared to life, and the sound was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. It was real. It was mechanical. It drowned out the quiet of the house. I didn't look back as I peeled out of the driveway, spitting gravel. The 15-minute drive into town felt like crossing an ocean. The trees were too green. The sky was too blue. Everything looked aggressively normal. A guy was out mowing his lawn, for Christ's sake. He waved. I think I waved back, but my arm felt like it belonged to someone else. The town was just a handful of buildings clustered around a crossroads, a post office, a church, and Martha's general store. That's where I went. It was the anchor of this place, the one spot that always smelled the same, sawdust and coffee and old-fashioned penny candy. Safe. The little bell above the door jingled as I walked in. Martha was behind a counter, a stout woman with kind, wrinkled eyes and flour on her apron. She'd been here forever. She knew everyone. "Amelia, honey, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her voice warm and raspy. I tried to smile. It felt like my face was cracking. "Just a rough night, Martha. Didn't get much sleep." "That farm gets a mean wind, I know," she nodded, wiping down the counter. "What can I get for you?" I grabbed a wire basket and just started walking, pulling things off shelves. Milk, a loaf of bread, a can of soup. I wasn't even looking at the labels. I just needed my hands to be doing something normal. I needed to perform the act of being a person who buys groceries. I brought the items to the counter. My heart was a frantic bird beating against my ribs. I had to say his name. I had to say it out loud, in this normal place, and have a normal person react normally. That would fix it. It had to. It's been a long year, I said, my voice coming out thin. I was trying to explain the dark circles under my eyes, the tremor in my hands as I fumbled for my wallet. Taking care of Ethan after the accident, it takes a lot out of you. There, I said it, the lie, the foundation of my whole world. I waited for her to nod in sympathy, to say something like, "You're a strong woman, Amelia." She stopped bagging the milk. She looked at me, really looked at me, and her friendly face slowly changed. The smile faded. Her eyes filled with a deep, bottomless pity that scared me more than any monster in a mirror. She tilted her head, her brow furrowed in genuine confusion. "Oh, you poor, poor girl," she said, her voice dropping to a soft, confidential whisper. "What accident are you talking about?" The air left my lungs. The buzzing of the refrigerated case behind me suddenly seemed deafening. The car accident," I stammered. "The one on Route 9, last year, with the deer." Martha reached across the counter and put her warm, flour-dusted hand on my arm. It was meant to be a comforting gesture, but it felt like she was holding me in place so I couldn't run. "Honey," she said, her voice unbearably gentle, "there was no survivor. Everyone in town knows. Ethan, he died right there at the scene. The sheriff, old Tom Henderson, he had to pull his body from the wreckage himself. Said it was one of the worst things he'd ever seen." The world didn't explode. It just stopped. The bell on the door jingled. A man in work boots came in, nodding to Martha as he headed for the coffee machine. The sound of his boots on the worn floorboards, the clink of a spoon against a ceramic mug. Life was just continuing. But my life had just been erased. Martha's words echoed in the sudden, vast silence of my mind. Died at the scene. Pull his body from the wreckage. And in that instant, everything connected. Not in a logical line, but in a flash of blinding, sickening horror. The way it hated the light, cowering from the slightest crack in the curtains. The hissing sound during the storm, a sound of pure, venomous rage, not fear. The 4 deep gouges in the floorboards by the door, not from a chair, from claws. The smell of damp earth and rot that no amount of air freshener could cover. The dead, torn-apart animals beneath his window, left like toys. The tall, impossibly thin shadow I saw in the mirror. The letter from Dr. Albright. My deepest condolences for Ethan's tragic passing. The absolute, unbroken silence from that room. No words, no coughs, no human sounds at all for an entire year. I was still standing there, staring at the can of soup on the counter. Chicken noodle. My hand was frozen, clutching my wallet. Martha was saying something, her face a blur of concern, but I couldn't hear her. My gaze drifted past her, through the big plate glass window of the store. I could see the road winding up into the hills. I could see the turnoff for our lane. And far away, perched on the highest ridge against the afternoon sun, was the farm, the house. It didn't look like a home anymore.
It looked like a dark mouth on the face of the hill, a patient, waiting mouth. And you know the thought that hid me then? The one that's still screaming in my head every single second? If the thing I've been feeding for a year, the thing I've been reading poetry to, the thing I've been calling my husband isn't Ethan, then what the fuck is waiting for me back at the house?